Hello, listeners. Welcome back to another episode of the preview show brought to you by the No Nay Never podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Bromley, and we are back with Statman Dave and our very special Portsmouth guest to look at this weekend's fixtures. Burnley at home to Portsmouth at Turf Moor. We've got all the stats, facts, and everything that you need to know ahead of that game. So, listeners, buckle up. Let's go. Welcome. We'll bring in our regular statistician, Dave Statman Roberts, in a minute. But firstly, welcome to the No Nay Never podcast, our good friend and new friend into the championship. It is Simon at PO4 Pompey Stats. Simon, we are delighted to have you here. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for the invite. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be a good show. We're really looking forward to getting to know you. It's going to be a good show. And joining us as ever is the main man himself, the best view in football. It is Dave Statman Roberts. Dave, welcome back. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, yes. Very well after a good win last week. We're getting things moving. It wasn't the most convincing performance, but yeah, we'll take a win at Leeds United any day of the week.
Well, you say it wasn't a convincing performance. I'm not sure I agree with you there. It should come as a shock to nobody. I thought it was a very good performance in the first half, and it was a brilliantly resilient defensive display in the second half. So I think it was a very well-earned point. But we are not here to talk about Burnley versus Leeds or Leeds versus Burnley for the football purist, Dave. We are here to talk about Portsmouth. We've got our very special guest here. I guess we should start, Simon, by congratulating you, title-winning champions into the championship. Yes, congratulations on a very successful campaign last year.
Yeah, it took a while to get there, but I'm delighted that last season ended the way it did. I think I didn't quite believe it would do until probably April, but it was great to see it get over the line. And I won't deny I won't miss League One. There were some interesting experiences in that.
Well, you say that, we don't miss the Premier League for very different reasons, but, let's not dwell on that. Just very quickly before we do kick Dave off with our stats for the show, when you say you won't miss League One, like, what is it very different to the Championship? Why are we saying this?
I think if you'd have asked me before last week, I'd have said the referees hopefully were better. I think I learned that the hard way last week.
That's an error.
But the quality of football, I think, is incredibly physical in League One. I think it, especially when you are perceived to be a big club in that league, every game is a cup final for people.
Yeah, we get that a lot.
It was tough. And doing that for the number of years, and where we've been to where we were, going all the way down to League Two and then back up, I think people assumed we would just, once we got out of League Two, the natural progression would be a couple of years in League One and into the Championship. It didn't happen that way.
It did not happen that way, no.
If I'm honest, I don't think many people expected it to happen last year in Mousinho's first season. I think people were incredibly surprised, in a good way. But when the appointment was made in January of his first managerial career straight from Oxford as a player coach, everyone was surprised. The way he put the team together, hell of an effort.
It's a great effort. Well, look, let's drill down into that a little bit more detail. Let's get our preview show kicked off first, though, by our resident statistician, Statman Dave, who's going to kick us off with a couple of stats, please.
Yes, we do have a couple of Portsmouth-related stats. Portsmouth were champions of England in 1948-49, and then again in 1949-50, with Reg Fluin as their captain and Bob Jackson as their manager. I think it's fair to say it's been mostly downhill since then. They were relegated from the top flight in 1959, although they did return again briefly in 1987. And then they were in the Premier League from 2003 to 2010. They were also FA Cup winners in 2008, beating Cardiff City. And despite going into administration and being relegated in 2010, along with Burnley, they reached the FA Cup final again, but this time they lost to Chelsea. In terms of matches between the Clarets and Pompey, between 1927 and 1959, Portsmouth Portsmouth visited Turf Moor to players on 17 occasions. The best they could manage were a couple of 1-1 draws. They were in 1950 and 1956. Burnley won the other 15. But in more recent times, Pompey have had a much better away record, having not lost in 8 visits to Turf Moor between 1995 and 2011, winning 5 and drawing 3.
Excellent stuff. Can I ask you, Dave, are you feeling the pressure this week?
Why is that?
Because we normally just have, your regular fan on, our great content creator. You've got a stat guy here on tonight. What if you got something wrong? And he says, what if Simon goes, hang on a minute, that stat's not right. I'm almost hoping that you've made a mistake, because that would be hilarious. I will laugh.
Time will tell, won't it?
Time will definitely tell. So that brings us nicely back on to you, Simon. I think we've already touched on these a little bit when we talked about it. Let's take you back to last season. You've already touched on this. You appointed your manager in April. We'll come on to him in a moment. Is League One very similar to the Championship in that pretty much nothing really matters or happens of substantial significance in the first half of the season? It gets to about February and then it's business end of the season and that's where everything happens. Does it follow the same route as a Championship?
I don't know, if you'd have asked me that a couple of weeks ago when we had just drawn away at Leeds and then away at Middlesbrough, I said, yeah, everything's going all right. And everything can wait until the new year. But when we've yet to get a win on the board and we're starting to feel it a bit and we've got the injury list racking up, I think there's an awful lot of pressure within the fan base to say we need that first win.
That's understandable.
I think we're starting to feel it. We've got a lot of injuries, so that doesn't change. That was the same in League One, and we're just getting used to that. But certainly we need that first win, and that's where the pressure is, and that's, I think, really felt in the last couple of results as well. Conceding 3 in both the last 2. It's just home the challenge that we got this year.
No, I can appreciate that. So, at what point last season you mentioned around April time? It's like, what were your expectations at the beginning of this season, and when did that start to change to actually think that you might actually get promoted? I know you mentioned that you thought you'd be in League One for a couple of seasons, but was the beginning of the season just simply about surviving?
No, last season, beginning of the season, we had a really poor. Well, not really poor, but we had a bit of an iffy start. We drew 1-1 against Bristol Rovers at home and we had a last-minute equaliser. And a lot of the squad, I think some of the signings were unknown. So some of the players we signed were fringe players at clubs like Burton. And it turned into our best centre-back, Connor Shaughnessy. And I think that surprised people. And it was the thing that really struck me last year was the resilience. So when you look at the club and you look at the squad, the amount of last-minute goals that we got to win games in the first half of the season was phenomenal. And I think the fan would say we weren't playing the best football, but we were grinding out the results. And eventually the champagne football kind of followed. And it just goes to show we had to earn it. We literally had to earn it. Probably weren't the best squad in the league, but the resilience and the mental togetherness of the squad really shone through.
Yeah. So talk us through your manager then. Obviously, like you say, was appointed halfway through the season. Very promising young manager, went from being player coach at Oxford to be promoted to you. What are your expectations getting such a young manager and one that's literally in his first proper managerial job and just come out of finishing his playing career? What were your expectations and I guess how is he now seen in terms of the fan base and how he's performing?
Yeah, so when we appointed him, I think in January, we had just sacked Danny Cowley. He was really well regarded with the fan base. He had a lot of affection for him, but it went badly wrong. We had a lot of injuries. He started playing people out of positions. And I think people were desperate for that big name that could attract. I mean, we were linked with Chris Wilder. We had names linked that we were never going to
You don't want him. You don't want him.
Don't want him now anyway. But we were desperate for that big name that would get us up. But we've got a director of football in Richard Hughes that has, I would say, transformed the club. And we believe it was Hughes who chose Messinio. They knew each other, and he was the one that went out of the league. And actually, when you look at the signings and you look at the way they work really well together. And they complement really well. And I think now, I mean, obviously it goes without saying, we absolutely love Messinio because of what he's achieved. The fact that he's stayed with us. I know Stoke have just sacked their manager. When Plymouth sacked theirs, we were worried that would he be the next kind of big name that a club would go for. But I think Messinio recognises we gave him an opportunity. We built the squad that he wants. And I think he wants to do things the right way. I might live to regret that. And next week he's off and he's at the Britannia. But he's really well regarded. And the thing that struck me from day one was the first time I heard him in an interview. He is so articulate and so clear in his vision. And I think that comes across in all of his decision making. And he's really won over the fans, I think, with the way that he leads the club, the way he engages with the fan base, and the honesty with which he speaks. And it's just, it was a breath of fresh air when he came in that January. And to be honest, he had a bit of an open goal in terms of he couldn't, as long as he kept us up, that was a win. He kept us up. He started to build the foundations, and then last season it just went better and better.
Yeah. What are his expectations this season? And is he in any jeopardy if you don't manage to survive this season in the Championship and you do need to drop back down to League One and try again? Does he stay in his job? Is there, will there be any call for a change, or is literally your biggest threat to him as a manager being poached by another club?
I'd like to say the latter. I think there's a real risk that even if we get, for me, fourth from bottom this season is a win. Stay in the Championship. We're not going to do an Ipswich. We're not going to do what other clubs have done where they've gone up and then up again. We just need to build that foundation. And when you look at the signings that we made in the transfer window, a lot of them are upcoming players like Blair that we got from Liverpool. He's a 19, 20-year-old kid, loads of promise, but he's probably not going to be the one that sets games alive this year.
No.
So I think for us, survive this season, everyone will be happy with that because it builds the foundation for the future years. I'm just really worried that if a Championship side loses or gets rid of their manager, he will be an obvious replacement if he's seen to keep Pompey mid-table safe, because he is a really attractive prospect.
Yeah. Listen, you don't even need to be successful this year. We lost our manager to Bayern Munich after winning about 4 games in the Premier League and largely being absolutely terrible for a season. So actually, I wouldn't be too worried about him being performing well. He might get poached if he's performing terribly. Believe us, we have experience of that. Dave, no nay never remembers. Let's head back over to you for a little bit, please. What have you picked for this week's memory match? It's going to be a Burnley versus Portsmouth game at Turf Moor, I believe.
As it always is, yes. We've picked the venue, and obviously the reverse fixture, it leaves us another option for the other half of the fixtures. With no home win against Portsmouth in the last 8 attempts. It's a bit unusual. We only have a strong home record against teams. We don't recently against Portsmouth. That's going back to the mid-90s. We're going to choose Burnley's last home win. That was from the 3rd Division title-winning season of 1981-82. The match took place on Saturday, the 27th of February, 1982, and Burnley were 3-0 winners. There were just over 7,000 fans inside Turf Moor for this 3rd Division game. Burnley were managed by Brian Miller, and Martin Dobson captained the team. The goals came from Steve Taylor. He scored in the first half. And then Mike Phelan and Derek Scott followed that up with goals in the second half. And the win stretched Burnley's unbeaten run to 19 games. Because we are going back a little bit, there's not really any of the no nay never team who, including myself, who remember the match.
No, I believe that.
So what I've done is I've got a few other bits of information. I've got the Burnley Express headline, which was Super Goals crowned a promotion-style win. And then in the report, it said Burnley manager Brian Miller said after the game that it would be a tragedy if this team did not win promotion. Thankfully, he wasn't to be disappointed, as Burnley went one better and went up as champions, lifting the third division trophy at the end of the season, which was the equivalent, obviously, of League One now.
Yeah, definitely. Do you remember that game at all, Simon?
I don't know. I'm kind of hoping you might have picked the game where we won the championship against you and won the title, but convenient the day didn't choose that one.
I did say it was a friendly show to our opposition fans, but it's not going to be that friendly. We're not going, our listeners will be like, "What is this nonsense?" Like, we'll be losing listeners left, right, and centre. No, we didn't.
That was at Fratton Park, wasn't it? So we'll keep that. Keep that for those.
Maybe we'll keep it. Depending on what happens this weekend. If it's a heavy win for Burnley and we obviously want it to be a friendly place, maybe we'll pick that one for when we come on the return leg. We'll see. No promises though, no promises. Because if you beat us on Saturday, no. Dave, let's stick with you for a little bit then. You want to give us a couple more stats of this fixture, please?
Yeah, following up, in April 1995, defeat at Turf Moor at the hands of Portsmouth confirmed the inevitable, and Burnley were relegated straight back to the third tier after a disappointing campaign in the season after the playoff victory against Stockport County at Wembley. Back to the match, and the visitors went ahead with the first half penalty from John Durnin, and Kit Simons doubled the lead just after the hour mark. David Ayer's 81st minute goal was merely a late consolation. And it's been almost 11 years since Pompey played at Turf Moor. On that occasion, in December 2011, there were 385 visiting fans from the South Coast who saw a scrappy game, but in stoppage time, David Norris snatched all 3 points for the away side with a low left-footed shot from just outside the box, which beat Lee Grant. That was virtually the last kick of the game, and it was also Pompey's first away win of that season.
Indeed. So let's bring things right back up to date then, please, Simon. Who do we need to watch out for at the weekend? Who's going to be your key players who are going to cause us some problems?
I would like to say Callum Lane has started the season exceptionally well. He kind of plays in the pocket behind the striker at number 10.
Yeah.
Scored an absolute belter at Elland Road against Leeds on the opening day of the season. I wouldn't be at all surprised to know he winds your fans up. He is an ex-Wigan lad, and he absolutely likes to get in the faces. But we've also got Murphy, who is a winger that we signed on a free from Oxford. He's just come back from injury, so it's his first game of the season last week. And if he gets firing, I think a lot of people have got a lot of hopes for him. He's really direct, really quick, takes players on the outside instead of cutting in. And I think between those two, they would be the biggest ones to watch out for this weekend.
Good stuff. Will we be seeing a familiar face in your nets still? Will Norris still play for you?
Yeah, he will indeed. Yeah. So when he...
I say familiar, he never really played for us that much, so it's not that familiar, but is he still your first choice keeper?
Yeah, he is actually. So we signed another keeper in the transfer window from Austria, and people think he might start to come through. There's a lot of scepticism about Norris when we signed him. But last season, I think he really stepped up and he deserves to stick in his place. The one thing I think he's getting challenged for is occasionally his distribution isn't the best. And also he's letting a couple of long-range shots. Yeah.
I seem to remember we knew that about him. But listen, we've gone from the sublime to the ridiculous where keepers are concerned. So, you know, Will Norris is just a long line of bizarre keeper things at the moment. What are your hopes for this season then, Simon? I mean, obviously, the table at the moment going into this game doesn't look that pretty, but we're 5 games in. It really doesn't matter. I know you're desperate to get that win. I can't imagine a trip to Turf Moor is what you would be particularly relishing. But you know what? Luckily for you, you could have been Cardiff. You could have played us 2 games in when we still had our entire Premier League squad, and that wouldn't have been pretty. But what are your aims generally for the season?
If you ever asked me at the start of the season, one of my friends asked, and I said 10th, 11th. I think realistically, the start and the injuries we've had, I think I'd probably settle for 15th, 16th. I think the squad's good enough when they're fit to not be struggling in the relegation zone, but we need to get people back fit. It's interesting, at the start of the season, the lineup that we had probably wouldn't have, don't think, have got into the starting lineup in League One. We had that many.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I think the sooner we get people back fit, the sooner we've got a really nice run of games after you guys and Sheffield United. So we can get that out of the way. I think it will just.
Do you play them after us?
Yeah, some really nice fixture list gave us kind of like all of the relegated teams at the start of the season, most of the top teams. Yeah, it's been a baptism of fire. So, but yeah, after you guys, it's Sheffield United.
Ouch. I'm just looking at the table now. It's interesting what you're talking about you just wanting to stay up. One thing that I think is quite difficult this season with the Championship is to identify 3 really obvious teams that will go down. I think Cardiff are in a lot of trouble. I actually tipped Preston to be in trouble this season. I also tipped Blackburn to be in trouble, and they're irritating me by keeping winning, which is annoying me. But I guess from your perspective, keeping one eye on that table, who would you say if it's not going to be you are going to survive? If we all agree that Cardiff probably look like they're going, which other 2 sides do you think are in danger of going down? I don't think there's 3 obvious ones,
No, and I'd say the same at the top as well. I don't think it's not like previous seasons where there are 3 that stood out as the top and 3 that stood out at the bottom. But
whoa, just a minute.
Well, obviously, other than you.
Sorry, please continue.
I think Plymouth. I was surprised when they beat Sunderland at the weekend, and I think they'd started the season. I mean, they looked a shambles away at Sheffield Wednesday on the opening day of the season, and they were conceding goals. The other one that I think might surprise people, but I've got a funny feeling Hull might regret.
Yeah, they've looked 3 draws and 2 losses.
Yeah. I think he punched above their weight, and when they got in the playoffs, I think they got in the playoffs last year. Or pretty near it. I think when he's left, they're in a bit of trouble at the minute.
Yeah.
Probably right, but I think they'll struggle to repeat what he achieved.
Yeah. It's funny, looking at Stoke sacking their managers feels like a funny thing. They're in 13th at the moment. Fine, they've lost 3, but they've won 2. That feels like a bizarre decision. But no, I agree. I think I'm still backing Preston to struggle. I think Sheffield Wednesday might be in trouble as well. Hull, Cardiff. If you can get your injuries gone, then yes, you're right. You might very well stay out of it. If you're plagued with injuries throughout the whole of the season, I fear it's going to be a difficult one. But yeah, with the squad and the manager you've got, you would think you've got enough to try and stay out of it. So yeah, fingers crossed it's not you. Where do we go next? Quick results overview, please, Dave. Finish us off with the key stats for this coming game.
Yeah, well, we've mentioned already that Turf Moor began as a bogey ground for Pompey for many years, but the reverse has been true over the past 30 years or so. But in terms of Burnley's overall past home record against Portsmouth, the stats look something like this. We've played 29 games. Burnley have won 17, drawn 5, with 7 wins for Pompey. In terms of goals scored, it's 51 goals for Burnley and 30 for Portsmouth.
Excellent stuff. Well, Dave, as we know, your stats are provided every week with love and care and many, many years of gathering everything that you need to know on Burnley Football Club. And you do have your own web page. And for those of you watching this show on our YouTube channel, you can see those details on the screen ahead of you. But for those listening on our podcast edition, Dave, why don't you tell our listeners how they find the Statman Dave statistician page, please?
Well, other than follow me on Twitter, which I hope people are already, you can follow the short link. So there's a short link created for it. It's bit.ly/Burnley Stats QL. That's Burnley Stats QL, all in uppercase.
Lovely stuff. Well, I mean, Simon, we can't really sit here and get Dave to start pushing his stats page when we've actually got a rival statistician on our podcast. I love it. I love how uncomfortable Dave is. He's squirming here. He's got a little bit of competition, and I love it. He's not the only statistician in football, so it would be remiss of me not to give our listeners and any Pompey listeners who are tuned in an opportunity to follow you and see what you have to offer. So the floor is yours, my friend. You tell us how we get hold of you.
Obviously, not a patch on Dave, so don't worry, Dave. I won't try and steal your crown, but no, I work in data. That's my career. So be able to provide football stats alongside my love of Pompey kind of is a win-win. If you go to Tableau Public and search for PO4 Pompey Stats, there are a number of visualizations that analyze our season, analyze some of our signings, and just allow me to have a bit of creative outlet when it comes to two of the things that I love.
Lovely stuff, and how lucky we are to have you on here. So do check that out. Anybody who's listening is a bit of a stat guy like our two gentlemen here this evening.
I think I need to give Simon some credit at this point as well, because he's a bit of a Tableau guru for many years. And when I was starting out, I didn't know too much about it, and Simon kind of give me a helping hand. Really, he kind of seen some of the stats that I posted, sort of highlighted those, and give me a little bit of a head start. So thanks to Simon for that.
Oh, look at that. I'm feeling the love here. It's very nice to have all of our opposition guests have been absolutely fantastic this season. It's nice to have a friend on for a change, Dave. Somebody you actually know. I'm being introduced to people here rather than the way around. Well, lovely stuff. Now, at this stage of the preview show, we hand over to our lovable little rogue, George Poole, who is going to give you this week's referee news. Over to you, George.
David Webb of Stanley, County Durham, has been appointed to take charge of this weekend's match at home to Portsmouth. 11 of his previous Burnley games have resulted in 8 wins, 1 draw and just 2 defeats, so a good record for us so far. Now, the most recent 4 occasions was when he refereed us during the 2022-23 promotion season. They were a draw at home to Stoke City, our home wins against Middlesbrough and Coventry City, as well as an away win at Bristol City, which some of you might remember was the last away game of the season. A fantastic day out in Bristol that day, let me tell you. But the only time he's shown a red card for Burnley in any of these previous matches was in error. It was in that match at home to Middlesbrough when he decided that Connor Roberts had handled the ball on the line. He sent him off and awarded a spot kick to the visitors. Now, luckily, Muric easily saved Chuba Akpom's penalty kick. And thankfully, the decision did not affect the result of that game. Of course, we went on to win against Middlesbrough. Now, the red card in question against Connor Roberts was later rightly rescinded. So, all's well that ends well. But this Saturday at home to Portsmouth, how do you think we'll get on? I think a comfortable 2-0 victory. I think the international break will have done us a lot of good. Getting the squad to know each other a lot more. And I really do like the balance of our squad. Perhaps a bit light up front, but with Fleming coming in on deadline day, it's bolstered us in the forward position. So, really looking forward to my first game at Turf Moor of the season and looking forward to hopefully bringing home 3 points. Okay, speak to you next week. Up the Clarets.
Okay, let's finish off. It is time for drumroll score predictions. Now, as our guest, Simon, we do offer you the floor to go first. Can you please give us what you predict the score will be at the weekend, please?
I'll go for an optimistic 1-1.
Excellent. Dave?
I think Burnley will probably be too good. I'm going to go for a 3-1 win.
I also think Burnley will be too good, and I'm going to go for a 4-0 win. We've had our wings clipped a little bit with a couple of really difficult fixtures over the last few days where we've had to defend really resiliently and get some hard-earned points. And I think a home fixture against a newly promoted side, irrespective of where we think they may finish, I think is going to be an opportunity for us to showboat a little bit. And I think Luca, if Luca can do what he did from about 80 yards against a Leeds United defence, then I think he's going to be very happy to see most defences in the Championship. So, yeah, I think your defence, Simon, are going to have to be on their toes at the weekend. So I'm going to say 4-0. Listeners, at this stage of the show, we ask you to pause this video and drop some comment. Oh, sorry, Simon. Did I interrupt you then? I'm so sorry.
What happened to the nice, friendly... I wasn't expecting a 4-0.
Well, I lied. Sorry. It was your own fault. You told us that you couldn't pick an exceptional team at the top of the table and win promotion. And at that point, I decided to inflict a 4-0 defeat on you. I'm sorry. It's all good, all good. It might not be. I could very well have completely scuppered us now, and we end up losing quite heavily. Where was I with that one? Yes, listeners, please do drop us a comment in the show notes. Please let us know what you think the show what the score line will be. Let us know how you think we will line up, and basically your general predictions ahead of the game. Anybody listening to this on our podcast episode, drop us a line on social media. You know how to get in touch with us. And while you're at it, subscribe, turn on notifications. Do not miss another episode of your favourite Burnley podcast. Dave, we're rounding off the previous show, please, with the EFL talking point of the week. What would you like us to debate, please, sir?
Well, this week we're taking a step back and we're looking at the League Cup competition, the EFL Cup, and we're wondering, do fans, players, managers take it seriously these days, and does it have a future in the football calendar? We've obviously been knocked out in the second round. We got a bye for the first round and went through to the second round and then straight out, so we didn't really bother the scorers too much this season. But does the competition really have a future, particularly when there's pressure from the expanded Champions League now from the Premier League sides? Teams not really taking it seriously. So that was kind of our talking point for this week.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty decent talking point. I think I'll kick us off with this one. I think where I stand with this is that I just don't see the point in the Premier League being in the League Cup anymore. They don't take it seriously. All of the teams outside of the top six just field their kids because it's a nuisance, it's an inconvenience to them. The top six sides don't care about it because they've got Champions League or other commitments. So you're not playing a Premier League side when you play in the early rounds of the League Cup. You're playing their youth team. So I don't think there's that much kudos in knocking out those sides anymore. It's not like the FA Cup. I personally would love to see the League Cup just be an EFL Cup. And it's a really good opportunity for the Championship and the Leagues 1 and 2 to get together and thrash it out. I think it'd be a much more exciting league, and everybody else can concentrate on it. That's what I would do with it, and I think we would get more. I mean, it's difficult because I think that element of not caring about it has come down to the Championship, because the sides that are either newly relegated from the Premier League and desperate to get back, or those that are really pushing for promotion that year, they don't care about the League Cup either, because it's all about promotion, because that's where the money is. So that's my thought, Simon. I'm going to pass the floor over to you to see what you think of the the League Cup and what you would do with it.
Yeah, Natalie, interesting you were saying about kind of the clubs not caring. We fielded a second 11 and went out to Millwall this year. So even the teams coming up in the league. I don't think the EFL helped themselves. I think the format of the League Cup now, I think in the third round, they do the alternate ones where the Premier League sides tend not to play each other. I think that favours the Premier League sides in terms of trying to support them to get through. But I just wanted to reflect on one thing you said about how it'd be good if they were all EFL clubs, because one of Pompey's best memories of living time was winning the Checker Trade Trophy against Sunderland at Wembley. And everyone would say the same thing about the Checker Trade Trophy. It doesn't matter. But actually, that final was one of the best experiences I've had supporting Pompey in 30 years.
No, how lovely.
Yeah, we had a record crowd at Wembley, went to penalties, Sunderland sold out their end, and it means the world, I think, to fans if they get that far. I think whilst it's tough to get there, a final at Wembley, regardless of where it is worth every bit to get there. And if that's all EFL trophy, so be it.
That'd be amazing, because it guarantees an EFL side or two EFL sides to be at Wembley for a final. How great! Can you imagine Wembley on that day, the flags and the atmosphere, and how good that would be? That surely somebody somewhere is going to see sense with this. It's like, if the Premier League doesn't want it, don't invite them. Let's have it as a proper League Cup. That would be amazing. And I think, I think there's still enough. It's clinging on, but I think there's still enough of a love affair with the FA Cup that some Premier League sides can pay that some attention. It's long been my view that where you get to Chris, because the third round doesn't start until January for the FA Cup. By that point, a lot of the Premier League clubs know that they're going to probably be safe from relegation, or that they're going all right this season. And when you've got the likes of Brighton, Bournemouth, West Ham, those kind of sides, Brentford even, they recently, they should be throwing everything they can at the FA Cup from January, because they're not going to get in the Champions League. They're not going to win the Premier League. So what else have they got to play for other than try and grind survival? I think at that point, the focus for them should be on the FA Cup. So I think if we take the League Cup off them, that makes the FA Cup even like their only chance at silverware. That would then, I think, reignite some excitement for the FA Cup. I think it's a win-win all around. So I might write to the FA and say, oi, listen up here. Get this on there. See what you think. Listeners, let us know what you think. This is your EFL talking point of the week. Does the League Cup belong to the actual EFL? Do we take the Premier League out of it and make it a full EFL affair? I think that would be amazing. Let us know your thoughts. You know how to get hold of us. You can drop us a line on social media or make a comment in the show notes. Finally then, here we go. Game face on. Dave. Quiz.
It's quiz time.
Nona Never versus Pompey Stats. Natalie versus Simon. What have you got for us this week? Come on.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. This I was sort of looking through my stats, trying to find something relevant, and the best I could do was a curious one, really. And it has a stat in itself, which I'll give you, and then the questions kind of a follow up to that. Looking back at matches between Burnley and Portsmouth at Turf Moor, specifically at Turf Moor, not at Fratton Park, there have been 7 penalties in those games, the 29 games we mentioned earlier, but only 3 of them have been scored, 4 have actually been missed. So we want to know the year, the last time a player for either side scored a penalty in a match between Burnley and Portsmouth at Turf Moor. And just to clarify on this, Simon, you have the option whether to go first, or if you wish, you can let Natalie go first. The choice is yours.
Please go first.
After you said that we were going to lose 4-0.
Oh, why did I say
that? Dave, I will go 2004.
Oh, okay. I think it's earlier than that. I think it's earlier, but I don't want to go too early. And actually, I only need to go 1 year earlier to be right. So I'm going to say... Oh, I'm trying to remember when you guys were still up in the top flight, and that was
a while ago.
We told you earlier in the show if you were listening.
No, I wasn't listening, Dave. I'm sorry. I was multitasking. Actually, it might be in my script. No, that's not. No, I'm not going to do that because that's not fair. Because Simon doesn't have a script in front of him. I'm going to say slightly earlier. I'm going to say 98.
Okay. The correct answer was 2010. It was a curious one because there were 2 penalties in the match, both for Portsmouth. Jamie O'Hara's penalty first was saved. Brian Jensen saved the penalty. And then Hassan Yabda scored later on. That was in the 75th minutes. That was the last player to score a penalty in 2010. That was in the obviously in the Premier League. So yeah, Simon with 2004 is the closest.
Ah, well done, Simon. I mean, you were still wrong, but well done. You won by default. So that, gosh, the table is closing up. That's now 4-2. We're still winning 4-2 to Nona Never against our opposition fans.
Dave, I thought you might have said it was David Nugent. I'm sure I could remember him scoring at Turf Moor.
He always scored against us.
He was playing for us, wasn't he? He came on loan.
Yeah. Then he left us and then basically scored against us every single time we played him. Which is that's a football stat, is that, isn't it? I think we're all completely misremembering all of our stats. I think there's a presumption that when a player comes back to play against you, they always score against you, and they probably don't. But there we are. Listeners, that is all we have time for this week. Dave, are you gonna have we got any community news to give our listeners before we wrap that up?
Yeah, just a quick reminder, there's a Clarets Collected free drop-in session that returns this Saturday downstairs at Burnley Central Library. They're on Grimshaw Street, just not too far from the bus station in the centre of Burnley. And that's before kick-off on Saturday between 11 and 2. So you can see all the various Burnley memorabilia that's been collected down there. There's books, programmes, all sorts down there. So go and have a look if you haven't been before. Or even if you have.
Excellent stuff. Okay, let's wrap that up. Listeners, we say thank you to our fantastic guest, Simon, for telling us all about Pompey and just being a genuine pleasure to have on the show. Simon, it's been lovely to meet you. Please do stay in touch. We'd love to have you back on in the return fixture if you want to come on.
Cheers, Natalie.
Yeah, brilliant. And of course, the main man himself, the best view in football. It's resident statistician Dave Statman Roberts. Dave, thank you very, very much, sir. We will be back on Tuesday with the analysis show with the rest of the team, looking back on what will hopefully be a win at home for Burnley in the Championship, taking us back up that table again in our quest for an immediate return to the Premier League. And Dave and I will be back next Friday, as usual, for the latest edition of the preview show. Please do subscribe, turn on notifications, and contact us on social media. You don't want to miss another episode of your favourite Burnley podcast. I've been Natalie Bromley. This has been the preview show brought to you by the No Nay Never podcast. Until next time.
The No Nay Never podcast is brought to you in association with the talkSPORT Fan Network. Our host and editor is Natalie Bromley, and the show is produced by Matt Moss. Our resident statistician is Dave Roberts, and our FPL expert is Adam Dennett. The analysis show team is collectively Tom Whittaker, Rich Steele, George Poole, Charlotte Rigby, and Adam Dennett. Our music is provided by George Gaskell, and our newsletter team is headed up by Jamie Smith. If you don't already, you can subscribe to our newsletter by visiting nonaynever.substack.com. Thanks as ever go to our partners talkSPORT. We are proud to be associated with the talkSPORT Fan Network.